legislative committee together, please. And Jennifer, is she on Zoom or where is she?
I'm right here on Zoom. Good morning.
Morning. Do you want to call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Cliff Manuel. Commissioner Long.
Here.
Jim Holton.
Here.
Rich McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Starkey. Commissioner Navarrete. I'm probably butchering her name, so we'll wait for her to get on to tell us. Okay. And Commissioner Bellamy.
Here.
Okay, we can proceed. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. And without further ado, I want to welcome everybody. I don't see any members of the public here that we need to introduce. Well, our illustrious secretary is here. And do we have anyone else that hasn't already been recognized? Okay. And our new commissioner, Navarrete, is not here yet either. Is she on Zoom, Jennifer? No.
She is not.
Okay. Then may I have a motion, please, to approve the legislative subcommittee minutes of October and November?
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner McLean, second by Chair Holton. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? No. Okay, now we have our federal legislative update and our famous Harry Glenn from Van Scoyoc. I don't know if Steve Palmer is on the line. Are you, Steve?
Steve is on, I think I saw him on the screen, so he's.
Yes, Commissioner, I'm here.
He's here. Well, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning,
From
thank you.
the grand old town of Bradenton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks, everybody, for being here. A beautiful sunny day in Florida. I'm sorry, Steve, you can't be here with us. It's 70 and beautiful. Thanks for letting us give a quick update on what's happened. A lot has happened since the last time Steve and I updated you on the federal matters. As you know, since our last meeting, Congress, the 116th Congress wrapped up. We'll talk a little bit about some of the funding items, including some COVID relief funding and transportation funding. As you know, the new Congress was sworn in on January 3rd, still dealing with some organizational issues there. And then, as you know, Wednesday, the new administration was sworn in. In fact, Steve will talk a little bit about the new administration and some of their priorities and some of the new appointees that are coming on board. First confirmation hearing for the new Secretary of Transportation was yesterday. So Steve will talk a little bit about that. So a couple of funding items from the end of the year as Congress wrapped up in December and the president signed into law on December 27th, an omnibus appropriations bill that also provided a $900 billion COVID relief package. As you know from our previous conversations, Congress in March approved the CARES Act, which provided $25 billion for transit programs. TBARTA was a recipient of some of those funds, so that was helpful here. In the latest version of the COVID relief bill that was approved and signed into law in December, there was another $14 billion for transit. And then last Wednesday, President Biden in a national address talked about his plans. His first legislative priority for the new Congress is another COVID relief package. And he's talking about requesting another $20 billion for transit programs in there. In the regular appropriations process, Congress continued to support robust funding for transit programs. All of the major programs we've talked about in the past, there was $1 billion for the Build Grant program, which is a major funding opportunity. Hillsborough County has benefited from at least 2 projects under the Build Grant. So there's $1 billion available there for funding transit programs, highway programs, and other forms of transportation. That's the same level of funding as last year. And in fact, just 3 days ago, the Department of Transportation released a draft notice of funding opportunity for the Build Grant. So applications will start rolling in for that this spring. And then for the Federal Transit Administration, Congress continued to support FTA programs, pretty much level funded. You can see the numbers up on the board there, but the most interesting one is Congress actually is interesting in responding to climate resiliency, increased the low-no emission bus and facility program from by $50 million from 75 to $125 million this year. So some of our local transit agencies are moving to electric buses, and that will benefit them. Real quickly, as I mentioned, Congress sworn in on January 3rd. Continue to have a Democrat majority in the House. Not much change in the leadership on the committees. I will note, though, on the bottom right, Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida will continue to be the ranking Republican on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation. He's been very effective for transit, and he's also been very effective for Florida. So that's good news for our state. And then on the Senate, I'm sure you're following the Senate after the Georgia elections is now at a 50-50 even split, with the vice president being the tiebreaker. The leadership of the Senate is continuing to negotiate how they're going to share that 50-50 split, share power in that setup. This hasn't happened since 2001, so they're trying to work through those issues. That has left a little uncertainty on some issues, particularly committee membership and in some cases committee chairmanships. But the good news is the Democrats will probably be chairing all of the committees, since they will have a one-seat majority with the vice president. And there's a new chair of the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio. He's been an advocate for transit, and that will be helpful. And then on the appropriations side, Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island has also been strongly supportive of transit programs. I'm going to pass over to Steve, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Biden administration's infrastructure plans and some of their appointees.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This slide really highlights some of the points of reference that the Biden administration was making during the campaign. It really is probably going to be superseded rather quickly by what the administration comes out with over the next few days and weeks in terms of their infrastructure proposal. But during the campaign, he did talk about, Joe Biden did talk about investing heavily into infrastructure. And as you can see in the middle of the page, really investing in zero emission transportation investments for cities of 100,000 or more. Because it was a campaign document, there's a lot of talk about labor protections and investing in people, because people vote, obviously. But we look forward to quite a bit more in terms of the infrastructure proposal. I think it's probably going to be more as a part of the COVID recovery proposal later this year. It could be in the spring, could be even in the summer. But the focus right now, obviously, is on vaccines and trying to deal with testing and getting that taken care of first. Next slide, please. So as Harry mentioned yesterday, Mayor Pete Buttigieg did have his confirmation hearing in front of the Senate Commerce Committee. There were a wide range of issues, and that committee does not have jurisdiction over transit. So while there were a few questions about the Capital Investment Grant Program, the majority of the questions focused on a number of different programs. The committee is dominated by senators from rural states. So there was a lot of interest in protecting rural transit and protecting rural intercity bus and rail service. One of the questions that he did focus on, and he a little stumbled over, was, he did say he would support all means of raising revenue for the Highway Trust Fund, which, as you know, funds transit. And his spokesperson quickly came out after the hearing and said, yes, anything but increasing the highway gas tax. So that appears to be something that this administration is going to take off the table relatively quickly. Now, the slide in front of you highlights some of his campaign promises. And again, he was focused on trying on zero emission, trying to bring transit systems up to a state of good repair, and encouraging mobility plans that include non-motorized transportation, such as bike sharing. So there's going to be a real interest in trying to change the general direction of where the Department of Transportation goes, making it much more focused on sustainability and climate change. Next slide, please. I will say one last thing on Mayor Pete. It's clear he's going to be easily confirmed. There was a lot of bipartisan support for him, so he should be sworn in probably by sometime next week. And President Biden has named Polly Trottenberg to be the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Transportation. Polly, who has been at DOT, is a really, even though she's commissioner at New York City DOT now, she really has been a Washington insider for a number of years. She worked in the Obama administration in the number 3 position at DOT, was involved in crafting their legislative and policy proposals. And then before that, worked on Capitol Hill, worked for Senator Chuck Schumer, who's now the Democratic, will soon be the majority leader. And she goes as far back as Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who many of us remember having been instrumental in trying to move transportation away from just a highway-centric orientation. Next slide, please. The president has also named Nuria Fernandez, who many of us know as the next FTA administrator. I have the good fortune of also being her consultant, as Santa Clara BTA has been a longtime client of Van Scoik Associates. She has served as not only as CEO at BTA, but also worked at New York MTA, worked at Chicago CTA, as well as WMATA. So she has a vast range of experience in transportation. She is the current APTA chair, and she did serve during the Clinton administration as deputy and acting FTA administrator. She will be starting immediately as deputy administrator, and just as Jane Williams was, but as soon as they can get through the FBI clearance process, she will be nominated and be the FTA administrator. I will say, just in closing, yesterday the White House named a number, the secretary too, named a number of different appointments to lower level positions at DOT, and it's clear they are moving in the direction of sustainability and climate change. They named the chief counsel from New York MTA, Subhash Iyer will be the FTA chief counsel, so that will be a new face. And then the deputy assistant secretary for policy comes from Smart Growth America. So there's going to be quite a bit of transit representation and orientation towards smart cities, which is something that Mayor Pete has talked about during his campaign. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to turn it back to you, and Harry and I will answer any questions.
Thank you so much, both of you. I have a question for you, Steve. Did I hear you correctly that Nuria is the new Jane Williams?
I did say that, and she will be deputy administrator for the time being. The intent, though, is that she will be nominated to be FTA administrator as well.
Well, that's terrific, because I had an opportunity to meet her last year at the APTA conference in New York, and a fascinating woman.
She's very dynamic. She's, like I said, she's served in a lot of different parts of the country in transit positions, so she'll bring a lot of experience to FTA.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, that's good for us.
Any questions?
I don't have any further questions. Do you? Oh, Secretary Gwen has a question.
I had one question. We had heard some talk that there may be
There's a token in your mic.
return.
Is this on? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Return to federal earmarks. And I wasn't sure if you'd heard anything on that.
Steve, I'll go first, and then Steve and I are monitoring that very closely. There has been conversation about that on our list of committee leadership. The House does have a new chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. She said during her campaign for the chairmanship that one of her goals was to bring back congressional earmarks. The committee has its first organizational session next Wednesday. We may hear more about it then. So just to clarify, there's nothing currently in the House rules that prohibit earmarks. So they could bring them back if they want to. It's just a matter of if they decide they're going to do that. My personal belief on this, Steve and I discuss this all the time, is I think they're only going to bring them back if it's bipartisan in nature. If the Republicans and Democrats agree to bring them back, I think there's a good opportunity to do that. And then there's the issue, what's the Senate going to do? I think there's, I don't know, Steve, 50-50 chance that they come back this year. And if they do come back, it may only come back in a limited area. It may come back in areas related to just infrastructure type projects and not the full scope that we saw the last time we had earmarks was in 2010. That said, the other thing, and Steve can confirm this, is that Congressman DeFazio, who's the chairman of the House Transportation Committee, has also expressed his interest in bringing back earmarks. He feels like will be able to help them move an infrastructure bill if there are member projects to benefit local districts and states in the bill. It may help members vote for the bill, and particularly if they have to take a tough vote on how to fund the bill like that. Steve, do you have anything else on that one?
No, Harry, you nailed it. The only thing I'll add is, as you mentioned, Chairman DeFazio is considering earmarks, bringing back earmarks for the multi-year bill. The advantage of earmarks in the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act, the multi-year bill, is those earmarks are multi-year as well. So they can be that money can be spread out over 4 to 5 years. But Harry, I agree with everything Harry said.
And I would just like to follow up by saying, nobody understands how important that is to a region more than you should, Harry, having worked so long for Congressman Young. I dare say our region has truly benefited in so many ways from the work that Congressman Young was able to do when he served on appropriations. And so remember that when you're there on lobbying on our behalf.
Well, and that's why it's important that Mario Diaz-Balart's retained his position as the leading Republican on the Transportation Appropriations Committee. And just, Senator Rubio is a member of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and Charlie Crist is a member in the House Appropriations Committee. So I think you have good representation in the area if we decide to go that direction.
Excellent. Anything else from anyone else? No?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And do we have Ron Pierce with us or no? I don't.
We are, Madam Chair. I'm on Zoom this morning.
Oh, look at you. Okay, well then you are next on deck, so you're recognized.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. I'm sorry we couldn't be with you this morning. Thank you for the opportunity. We're going to give you a quick update on kind of where we are from an appropriations process in Tallahassee on our issue. And I'm also going to give you a quick bill update. So we're off and running in Tallahassee. We've already done one committee week. We were in Tallahassee last week. Obviously, the world's a bit different. Access to the Capitol is limited, so we're doing a lot of virtual meetings. The Senate, everything's virtual, and the House are the ability to be able to do some meetings in person, but it's very limited access to the Capitol at this point. We return to Tallahassee next week for committee week number 2. Let me turn it over to Caitlin Bailey. I'll have her give you a quick update, kind of where we are from an appropriation standpoint, and then I'll get into where we are from a bill standpoint as well. So Caitlin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Like Ron said, Tallahassee is completely different this year due to the COVID-19 protocols, but luckily for us, that hasn't stopped us from getting the ball rolling with getting your bills filed and your appropriation forms requested. This year, we will be working with Representative Jackie Toledo again in the House for your $1.5 million operations appropriation. We already have a bill number from the House. That House bill number is 2037. And then in the Senate, we'll be working with Senator Jim Boyd. He's newly elected to the Senate. He was previously in the House, but he represents Manatee County with a portion of Hillsborough County as well. So we've been speaking to his office this week, answering all of the questions that they have, and we should be getting confirmation in the coming days, if not today, that those forms have been submitted on our behalf. A couple of things we just wanted to put on your radar this year. Under Speaker Chris Sproul's leadership, there has been a few rule changes. The first one being that when submitting our House appropriation form, David had to submit an attestation form, simple form verifying that all of the information on our appropriation request was indeed true, and that if we are given the funds, that they will be used appropriately. So the second one is, you might remember in years past, you could get a placeholder of a much smaller number in initial House budget to be taken to conference to where you work out those numbers. This year, Speaker Sprouse has said absolutely not. That's not how he's going to do things. He wants you to have at least 50% of your appropriation included in the initial budget to be taken to conference. So that's something we'll be working on, trying to make sure that we can get 50% secured and ready to go into conference to hopefully get to the full number.
And where is that money coming from?
Madam Chair, and I'll kind of get into some of the undercurrents. What we've asked for is, so there's really 3 undercurrents, Madam Chair, that we're facing in Tallahassee. Number one is, where's the money coming from? We're asking for some version of general revenue. That way we're not having to work out of the Transportation Trust Fund. Because if we take dollars out of the Transportation Trust Fund like we have in years past, that potentially could impact our transit partners and some of our other partners in the region. We obviously do not want to do that. I know that's something that's important to us as a board of directors, but more importantly to other groups and organizations in the Tampa Bay area. In the past, we've done the appropriation directly through DOT. Working with DOT, we believe that having the appropriation come directly to TBARTA, which we can totally do since we are an entity that's created by the legislature, is something we're going to work on to be able to do. If for some reason we have to be able to get dollars through the Transportation Trust Fund, is do it in such a way that it's off the top of the trust fund and doesn't impact any of the work plan, especially the transit work plan within the region. So at this point, we're pushing for non-recurring general revenue, but that kind of leads me to undercurrent number 2, which is, Tallahassee is facing a $2 billion shortfall. non-recurring revenue will be difficult to come by. And so we do believe there will be non-recurring revenue out there, because if you look at the budget, the revenue estimates that were put out in June, the revised estimates, the state's beaten those estimates every year, month over month, since July. So we do believe there may be an opportunity for some non-recurring revenue to be in play. But again, the challenge is they're going to have to backfill again, almost $2 billion. The other issue that's going to be an undercurrent for us, and I want to make sure that the committee, and I'll be, share with the board later, is, us receiving $2.2 million in CARE Act funding. That is an undercurrent we're going to have to be able to answer questions on. That if we received $2 million, in the last 6 months or so, from the federal government, why do we need additional dollars from the state? So we're prepared to start answering those questions, and that's something that we'll be working on.
Okay, well, good luck with that.
Madam Chair, can I turn really quick to the bills? I can just take 2 minutes. Number one, our Senate bill, as approved by the board, has been filed by Senator Roussan at Senate Bill 422. It's pretty much identical to the bill that was filed last year. I made it through the Senate on a 40-0 vote. Representative Mariano up in Pasco County will be the bill sponsor this year in the Florida House. That bill should be popping out of bill drafting and filed hopefully sometime next week. I know some folks have approached David and others with some potential amendments. I know Whit Blanton's, come to us with a couple ideas. We don't see many major challenges with it. Number one, just renaming the CCC to the Suncoast Transportation Planning Council, referring to that within statute, but also making sure, trying to leave some language in there for there is some coordination between TBARTA and the Suncoast Transportation Planning Council. So that's something we're going to talk to our bill sponsors next week in Tallahassee, and if something that we don't have a major issue include those when we get to the first committee reference in the House and in the Senate. So one final thing I want to mention to you that I know is really important to you, Madam Chair, is the DOT work plan. As we all know, the West Shore interchange was pushed back from 24 to 26. That creates many challenges potentially. It's kind of a major project that's going to impact other projects in the Tampa Bay area. We had a really good conversation yesterday with President Simpson. As Harry and Steve were talking about earlier, there's two opportunities for additional funding out of Washington, D.C. One would be a stimulus package. It would help local and state governments. Number two would be some type of infrastructure package. One of the things that the President Simpson said yesterday, if they do get additional dollars, they can backfill for transportation. He is definitely open to making sure that key projects like the West Shore interchange is put back into the 2024 portion of the work plan. So that's something that we'll continue to work on, continue to monitor, and report back to the board as needed.
Okay, is that it?
Yes, ma'am.
From your end? Are there any questions from the committee members? No? I have a bunch of them, Ron, if you don't mind, and if the committee would allow, because I was very quiet in my debriefing with David when we had it the other day. But I do want, for the sake of the folks that are here, there's a couple of issues that I am really beginning to have a bit of an attitude about. And that is the members of TBARTA who are appointed from different entities, and some of them are required by statute. And I just really take exception to members who are consistently not here, number one. Number two, we are always struggling to get a quorum for this board. And it's an important board that has an important mission. That all said, I would like to know some kind of a strategy that either we come up with from the board, and I hate to have my back to all of you, so I apologize. But I think we need a strategy to somehow get the governor to make the appointments that he is responsible for making. It's very difficult to run a board that is supposed to be charged with a specific mission, and we haven't been able to take a vote since November. When was the last meeting that we had?
We had a meeting in November, but no quorum. So we
Well,
did have
that
a quorum
doesn't
in
even
October.
count in my mind.
So October was the last.
October, I mean, you know, call me a pessimist if you want. I've never been known to be one. But having had the opportunity and privilege to serve in the Florida legislature, when you have an agency that's created in statute and you don't have a board that shows up that can show the legislature we're actually getting things done, I think that's a big problem. And I happen to know that there's a pretty prominent senator who has asked more than one person, what is the purpose of TBARTA and why do they exist? So from my perspective, it is irresponsible for us to keep asking for public dollars to fund this agency when we don't even have a board that cares enough to show up. I know that's a very strong statement, but we are charged with a mission. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ron. Did not the legislature express their keen desire for us to begin to work on projects that were futuristic in vision, taking advantage of some of the latest and greatest technologies that are out there to provide public transportation options for our citizens? Isn't that what they said last year when they gave us the money?
Yes, ma'am. 2 sessions ago, when they gave us the $1 million, that's definitely what they said, is wanted us to be the agency in the Tampa Bay area to spend that $1 million on those initiatives. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that was 2 years ago. What project are we working on that we have actually turned a shovel on? I'm just asking that question. Does anybody else feel strongly about this? Because it's a big issue for me as a public servant. And I just don't even know what to say, but I don't think we're going to be able to keep on keeping on if we can't show our citizens that we're getting things done. And that is all of the reason why several years ago, I mean, I did work from my heart, really, really hard to craft that memorandum of understanding with PSTA so that we could have a lean, mean machine and put our money into projects and getting stuff done. And I don't mean to be droning on, but this leads me to another question, Secretary Gwen, because I don't know the answer. I have been involved in public policy for a long time. You probably all can tell I'm not a kid. That said, the way in which we fund transportation, public transportation, has not changed in all those years. And I question our ability to be nimble in the way we fund transportation to take advantage of all the newest and greatest things that are coming along. So anybody want to speak to that, or does anybody disagree or have any input, shed any light? I'm begging you. I don't know what else to say.
Chair, I'll make a couple of comments too. And first and foremost, I totally concur with you that folks that are on this board need to show up, period. I know COVID has been an impediment for a lot of us. I think our next 2 board meetings are going to be more in Tampa Bay, so it's a little more central to a lot of folks. This area is a great drive for me from downtown St. Pete, and certainly not an issue, but I know from people that are in Hernando or other counties, it's a little more difficult. I personally have encouraged the governor to make the additional appointments needed to be made to this. Obviously, in his defense, he's been preoccupied with COVID and other state issues here. But we do need to get on with that, and we need to focus on deliverance of projects, not on more studies, on more discussions, on more analysis and consultants. We need to deliver for the people, and that's ultimately why we're here. So to your point, I think we need to have that serious discussions with legislative leaders as to just what they envision for TBARTA doing and the longevity of us as a board in terms of what we're going to do, what we're going to focus on, and what we need to accomplish to ultimately deliver for the folks of the Tampa Bay region and not just talk and talk and talk about it. So I completely agree with your points. I think that those honest discussions need to occur with legislative leaders and the governor's office to see, because we are embracing on a new opportunity here with the new administration to have some incredible funding for much needed infrastructure and resiliency projects in the state. We need to capitalize on it and not just study it. And I think that's the point we all need to realize here. And we need to have those discussions with DOT, with the legislature and others as to the best way of going about doing that. And perhaps we need to take a fresh look because business as usual has not worked for a long time with transportation. And we have set the tone to do things regionally. We should continue with that, but we need to directly get the money to the folks out there and not just have these meetings and talk about it and talk about the future. We need to act now in the present.
I just love it when you agree with me, Mr. Chair. That is a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
And so I guess my question is, what is the action item? Secretary, did you have input?
Yeah, not really to talk about the board appointments and so forth, but in terms of how we fund
Right.
transit in particular. So we do have a task force within a department right now that's looking specifically at how we could better fund transit initiatives and major transit projects. And we do have flexibility within our policies to allow us to spend more money, for instance, strategic intermodal system funding. We could spend more of that on transit than we currently do by policy, but there are certain things that were restricted by statute. For instance, some folks have talked about providing the 7 years of operating. Right now, that's only allowed for commuter rail. So that would have to be changed, I guess, in statute in order to be able to do other types of projects. But we are moving towards trying to find better ways because there are urban areas within the state that are looking more towards, we can't widen every road anymore. We don't have that many to widen. Can we use some of that money for transit? The only concern I have with that when I look at it from a regional standpoint is most of that money still requires a local match. And so we'd have to be careful that if, for instance, more money was to be put into matching funds for transit, that we are ready with the matching dollars, or else what could happen, quite honestly, is Miami and Fort Lauderdale, who have funding available, local funding for transit, could end up being ready for that money. And then not only would we not necessarily be ready for that locally, but then we lose other projects through the SIS because more money would go to that. So all I'm saying is it's kind of got to work hand in hand. We need to find a way to make sure there's local match available when we make those changes so we don't miss opportunities to use that additional funding.
See, now this is music to my ears, and it says to me that we might be poised really, really well to advocate. Are you listening, Ron? Because this applies to you. To advocate for policy changes equally as strongly as we're trying to advocate for $1.5 million. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I bring it up as information and you can use that.
Well, I know it, but if I'm misinterpreting what I thought I heard you say, in order for us to be able to be more flexible from your position or department, then we have to be ready with a project.
Yeah, and more, I guess, more specifically, the local funding to allow the state match to come to it.
Well, why this is so critical to me, not that the other counties probably care so much, but I know you're from Hillsborough, so you do, because you've got a Supreme Court thing hanging over your head. And we are starting the initial conversations of how do we replenish our transportation trust fund. So while we're having those very difficult conversations, especially in given the COVID pandemic, government still has to function, and more than ever, our citizens need public transportation, to get to their jobs, not to mention putting projects on and turning the shovel puts people to work, last I heard. So maybe we need to wrap up the legislative committee because I'm talking it to death, but I just feel so strongly that these issues are important and we need our board to be engaged. Okay, you're shaking your head, but are you agreeing? Good.
And Chair, I'll make one last comment too. I think we need not only the board engaged, but we need our constituent county commissions to really come up and find the dollars, to help DOT with local matches that are part of our projects. And that's been, to David's credit, one of the issues here in District 7 is that many cities and counties ask for dollars and help from DOT. Studies are done. And then when it comes time to find the funding, the cities and the counties do not. Now, having lived also in South Florida, I know that that's generally not the case down there because they come up with dollars to come and fund projects along the way. So,
well, we're starting those conversations, Commissioner Holton, in Pinellas. Hillsborough has a boatload of money if they ever get to use it.
we're hopeful.
So we're hopeful. And, but it's awfully difficult to ask for local dollars when we don't have a project that we can say we're ready to go on. And I guess my question to you, David Green, is when is that going to happen?
So in the regional transit development plan, there were many projects identified, some obviously more complex than others. The easier projects to implement are commuter services.
Oh, I'm so sick of hearing that. I just want to throw up. That's not the future. That's not technology.
Mr. Chair.
Who? Oh, Commissioner Bellamy.
It's quite clear we're going to have a lot of moving parts in order for us to pull some of these projects off. And it's clear that we all hear your frustration. But how we take and massage those moving parts, I think we have a responsibility to identify that. And I think, and I'm the first one to say that I've missed some meetings for different reasons. And truthfully, I told David I may not be here today, to be honest with you, because I had a transition of a loved one yesterday, but I came. So everybody has different issues that they have going on in their life and everything like that. But the commitment is to identify the projects, whatever the low-hanging fruit.
Thank you for being here.
Whatever the low-hanging fruit are, as far as which ones we can identify and say, this is one that we can do, regardless of where the funding and who's responsible for it, which area that it comes from, and then start setting some goals and getting some things accomplished. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about it, but I'm not the type person that attack anyone. And I'm gonna tell you, what we have in David is someone that's a mover and someone that's gonna get it done. I think we, and I'm just as guilty, as leaders, have to make sure that we do the necessary lobbying and the necessary communication so we can make sure we give David what he needs in order for him to get projects done. And I'm not necessarily sure we've done that, in my opinion. And I may be the negligent because of some of my absences and some of the other commitments of things that go on. But when you start talking about regional project impact, there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of patience. But in all due honesty, when we identify, 2 or 3 things and say, well, within this fiscal year, we should be able to get this accomplished based on receiving funding and everybody getting on the same page, then we take those steps. But I'm not necessarily sure that where we are right now, and if I missed it, I know you've had some projects that we put out there, but I think as a board, we say, hey, this is the one we're going to go at. We want this one done right now. And then we say that as leaders, and then we give David the support and make sure we get the resources behind him. And I think we'll be more impactful, and then we can give our constituents something that we're getting accomplished. And that's what you're asking for.
It is, and I thought we had made a couple of those decisions with the cable propelled transit and with the air taxis. Didn't we not?
We did. We have the aerial gondola RFP, which is going to be issued on February the 1st. So we've been working with Ford Pinellas, the cities of Clearwater and St. Petersburg on the scope of work. We're issuing the scope of work on that, or the RFP on that.
That's incredible news. Ron, you should be telling that to Senator Brandis.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, February 1st is right around the corner. And then what else?
And in terms of the air taxis, Lilium, as I understand it, has submitted an unsolicited proposal to the city of Tampa to use one of their parking garages as a landing site for their air taxi operations. So that's now in the city of Tampa's hands, and they've got to go through their unsolicited proposal process on next steps. But Lilium is moving along in terms of trying to secure some landing sites in the Tampa Bay area.
Did you hear that, Ron?
Yes, ma'am.
And what about, I saw Debbie is on the phone, aren't you, Debbie?
Debbie's muted, but she's here, trying to unmute.
I saw her. All I wanted her to speak to was Harry's here, and I know he represents us on PSTA, and we're ready to go with more electric buses given we get the funding, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We have 6 already and more on the way.
Good. So here's my point. Commissioner Bellamy and Commissioner McLean from Hillsborough and from Manatee, those are projects that we've identified that we should be talking to our legislators about why we need the $1.5 million. I'm sorry it took us so long to get to this place where we're talking about real projects, but those are real. Right? Right?
Absolutely.
Look at that. Okay. Do we have anything else, Ron?
No, ma'am.
Do we have an action item about how to get the governor to make his appointments? Can we write a letter, Chair Holton?
Yeah, I have personally spoken with his office about doing that. I'm happy to do that again to encourage him to do so, but I don't want to go too far in terms of a board action requesting the governor to do what he is obligated to do pursuant to statute.
Well, it's been
try to
3
nudge him.
years. How long are we going to wait?
That's regrettably within his discretion to do that. So we have to work around that, but I'm happy to encourage him to make some appointments. And if there are any recommendations of appointments, we can do that.
Commissioner McLean and then Commissioner Bellamy.
I too have talked with his office also on the appointments for a selfish reason, but I have talked to his office. They were quite polite. They are aware that these need to be made. They're moving so in that fashion. However, with all that he's had on his plate over the last 6 months, I think he's been bogged down pretty hard on the right issues. I do believe he'll get to them. I do believe he'll get to them within the coming future, but we'll have to wait through COVID again a little bit longer for that. Very polite office. They're aware. They're just what I would call stressed a little bit in terms of what they have on their plates right now. So
I think we're all feeling that.
yes, we are.
Commissioner Bellamy?
Yeah, I haven't spoken to the governor's office. I'll leave that to some of you all. I want to take a step back as far as the projects. And I think when you're asking, saying that we have to talk to our legislators, and I wrote down the lobbyists, also But I think it's very, very important, and I'm not doing this, I'll be the first one to say, to identify the communications that's coming from the lobbyists to support the project, as well as what the individuals who have the end to communicate with those legislators, what are they saying? And the lobbyists and the legislators actually probably need to be saying the same thing so we can get that momentum. And I'm not sure if it is being done, but maybe you all can comment on that. But if we want to say, this is what we're going to do, we're going to move forward, I think strategically, our lobbyists, we need to make sure, and I'm sure that they are aware, but also when we're talking to our friends, as far as legislators, hey, we need to make sure we get some support on this. And then what's their feedback? Bring that back to the board to see how we need to massage the communication a little bit differently so we can, again, have a united front until we get what we're trying to get accomplished. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and just to further that a little bit, and David, I may have missed it, but I don't know if we have anything written on this that we could provide our lobbyists and our champions out there to include the regional transit agencies, I should say the local transit agencies. I don't know if we produced anything like that that said, hey, we have come to a conclusion, this is the way to proceed, this is how we like to proceed, and give them an update on that. You know, you mentioned we have an RFP on the streets for the area gondolas. It probably would be nice to let everybody in our region partnerships to be aware of that, so they can, number one, advocate, and number two, speak with the same kind of mindset and understanding. So,
Ron?
Now, Madam Chair, now we hear everybody, and we know we meet with all the members of the delegation that represent our counties every year. As you know, David, a member of the board, come to Tallahassee. That's going to begin again during the February committee weeks. And so I think that's a great message we should carry to them on things that we're getting done. So we'll make sure that we have that message. We'll make sure that it's carried out in Tallahassee.
Okay. If there's no further business with regard to the legislative committee, I see we're running behind now, and we still have our finance committee meeting to have. So do we have finance committee members that are supposed to be here that aren't here yet, Jennifer?
I do see that some people were supposed to be online that are not here yet, but we can go ahead and proceed with who you have there in person.
Okay. Okay. Well, again, can I have a motion to approve the October, November Finance Committee meeting?
motion to
Minutes?
approve.
Motion by Commissioner McLean, second.
Second.
Second by Chair Holton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Melanie, do you want to take us through the, oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing, the December financials? We're almost in February.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So for the year to date through the month of December, our net surplus was $327,000. So this surplus was $159,000 under the budget amount of $486,000. So when we look at the revenue, we were under budget by $946,000, and this under budget amount was due to the PD&E, time of the PD&E study and the technology project, along with the use of the 5307 funds. Coinciding with that is the under budget amount of expenses of $787,000 for the month of December. And just want to let you know that we did receive all the local contributions from all the counties, and this left us in a very good cash position of $575,000 for the month through the month of December. And that pretty much wraps up our financial report through the month of December.
Isn't that great? We have money in the bank.
Yeah, and I'd like to send a big shout out to the local transit agencies for their contributions and funding. well received and will be good stewardship of that money. But a shout out to them as to say thank you for the continued support.
And to the counties.
Yes, and the counties too. I stand corrected. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Questions?
No question?
All right, well, thank you.
Okay, Diane Durr is next. Morning, Diane.
Good morning.
Morning.
So back in November, the staff were charged with a directive to research for additional grant funds that would address TBARTA's need for operational cost and capital. So my initial charge was to contact the 5 counties that we actually work with regarding community development block grant disaster recovery funds. So I have a presentation here. I believe you may have it in your packet. So, okay, so let's go to the, okay. So to summarize what I actually did, I contacted the 5 counties, which of course, Hernando, Hillsborough, Manatee, Pasco, and Pinellas, to find out if indeed they had any disaster recovery funds that were unencumbered that we could possibly capitalize on and use for our capital or operating expenses. And most of the responses had to do with the fact that because of COVID, funds that were remaining that had been unencumbered at that time had been redirected to address the issues of COVID. So then with that having been done, my next thought process was to see what options we had in addition to disaster recovery, because one of the things that disaster recovery addresses, of course, is undeclared disasters that are mandated by the federal government. They are used for specific projects. So they would be a little bit more challenging to get funds from that particular part of funds. So what I did then was to ask them about regular community development block grant funds, which are more or less tied to any specific projects that each county has identified in their 5-year plan. So when I did that, I was then told that, of course, there is an application process that we could probably utilize, but what would happen is it has to be identified in the 5-year plan. And if it's not identified, then sometimes they can get an exception and they can go ahead and do an amendment to their plan. So for instance, if TBARTA had a specific project that they wanted to apply for funds under, we would identify the project and make an application process. And then it would be based on competition from other nonprofit agencies. So that was the grand scheme of the research that I did. So if we go to department feedback, what typically happens during the course of an annual budget process, each county has very specific guidelines from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development section, as to what they are supposed to do as it relates to getting funding in the communities. So there is an application process, and most of the processes are about the same time each year, and they would be in the first quarter of each year. So what we have here is based on my conversations with those governments, capital expenses and operating expenses would normally be a low priority because what they're dealing with is community needs. And they really, not that they frown upon government or nonprofits asking for capital expenses, but again, it's specifically for projects that has already been identified in a 5-year plan. So one of the things that Hillsborough County said to us was that, I'm sorry, Hillsborough County. Okay, so the feedback that I got from Hillsborough County is that they should be starting their application process about this time, about mid-January, and then applications are due in March. And we have identified the areas that they actually do their funding for. But again, as I stated here on the PowerPoint, Hillsborough County did not have any unencumbered funds to reallocate. Manatee County, I'm sorry, let's see, I think I skipped one. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped Hernando County. Hernando County actually referred us to Hernando County Mass Transit System, and I found out that they are actually having their grant applications issued the second quarter in this year, which would be April. So there is an opportunity that we may be able to capitalize on some of their funding. Manatee County. Again, Manatee County, they issued a notice of funding availability. It has not been announced, but it should be announced maybe early February. And they are projecting that because of COVID again, and because of the services that they have already funded in past, they don't anticipate that there will be any additional funds as it relates to being able to capitalize here. But they did refer us to Manatee Community Foundation as a source. So we've been in conversation with Manatee Community Foundation, and we are still awaiting some additional directives from them. Pasco County. Pasco County has not issued their notice of funding availability. And again, they follow, I was told specifically, they follow their priorities as identified in the 5-year plan. And also they have specific areas that they target. And again, they do not have funding at this time. Pinellas County actually recommended us to contact Forward Pinellas, and that's an agency that TBARTA is currently working with. So in conclusion, I think that our best options as it relates to trying to find additional funding for capital or operating expenses is to contact the 2 agencies that we have been referred to and see if after April, there may be an opportunity for TBARTA.
Thank you, Diane.
Yes, you're welcome.
Members, we are running really late. We're going to have to cut short something. What are your wishes?
Proceed on. Great presentation, by the way, and I think we keep advised as that progresses along, but up to you. If we have more presentations here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
No questions.
No, thanks.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your hard work. David, can you do your message about the variable sign update quickly?
Yes, ma'am. Mine's just very quick. And this is another follow-up item to a conversation that we had at the November meeting related to the variable message signs that FDOT has on the interstates. And we got into that conversation as it relates to our van pool program and commute options that TBARTA promotes. And Commissioner Starkey, I believe, asked whether it'd be possible to promote our services on those variable message signs. We did contact FDOT, and as it turns out, there is a statewide policy related to those signs, what their intended uses are. And the short answer is no. The signs are intended to manage traffic and provide alerts and regulate the roadway. They do make temporary exceptions for public safety messages, but the intended use that we would be looking for does not qualify. So, as good an idea as that is, we're just not eligible to take advantage of those signs.
All right, thank you. The commuter service ad campaign, Chris?
Yes, thank you. I will be very brief and I will speak from
Oh,
here.
there you are.
To be expeditious, I will speak from here. This is a repeat of a request that was submitted in November, but did not have a quorum at the board meeting. So it's being resubmitted. So I will be brief in surmising it. Essentially, we have money under a transportation surface grant agreement to support the van pool program. And the request is that the finance board recommend for approval an expenditure of $101,500 for a billboard campaign with Clear Channel to promote van pool. What I want to emphasize is that this money comes from a grant program specifically to promote van pools. It is the FHWA Surface Transportation Program. And I quote, "The purpose of this agreement is to expand the regional van pool program." And within that, there are dollars that have been budgeted to this year's TBARTA budget. So understanding the concerns over expenditures as we need to, I'd just like to emphasize that these dollars are specifically to promote van pool, cannot be used for any other purpose. They're not general funds or don't come from another source.
Well, I guess we can go ahead and make that recommendation, but we don't have a quorum for our board meeting, so we're stuck. Am I reading that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Then, is there any other business?
If you don't mind, I think we should go through the process of making a motion though and improving it as a committee so we can move it forward to the next board when we have a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that not correct? Or do you
Well,
want
I was under the impression we weren't going to have a quorum for our board meeting.
for the board, but for the following board, we could take that forward to the following board when we have quorum. And then that way we won't have to go through this again in the next funding meeting.
Okay, well, does someone want to make a,
I'll move to advance the recommendation to the full board.
And I'll second.
okay, it's been moved and it's been seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Is there any other business before the finance committee? Anybody? I think we've exhausted that. Future, same with future meeting subjects. So we are adjourned and you're the chair of.
We will roll right into the policy committee meeting and I'll call that meeting to order. And Jennifer, I guess, do you want to take a roll call?
Sure. Jim Holton,
Here.
Cliff Manuel, Rich McLean,
Here.
Commissioner Starkey, Commissioner Bellamy,
Here.
Commissioner Narvard, and Commissioner Long.
Am I on the policy committee?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
It's getting.
All right.
Welcome.
We do have a quorum. You can proceed.
Thank
See what happens when I don't have my copy of the.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Jennifer, although we don't have any public members in the room with us today, I don't know if we have any written comments or anything.
We do not have any public comment for this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will step to item 4, consent agenda. I need a motion for October and November policy meeting.
Move consent.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes from this committee and we'll go right into an information item and I'll bring up Brian Pizarro so he can talk regional transit improvements and implementation challenges.
Good morning, everyone. I'll wait for the slides to come up. So good morning. TBARTA adopted Vision 2030 back in June, and it identified regional transit improvements that TBARTA could either undertake on its own or assist the other transit agencies with. Now, staff is very cognizant of the fact that this board wants to get things done and not just do studies. The purpose of this presentation is to explain the financial hurdle that TBARTA is going to have to overcome before we can make that happen. Now, Vision 2030 identified both short and long-term transit and regional transit improvements. This is a slide, this is a table of some of those improvements from the plan. Now, in an ideal world, TBARTA would have the funding to assist local operators with improving existing regional transit service. Things like increasing their frequency, adding weekend service, adding earlier or late night hours. This is a table also from the plan. It's a partial list of some of the long-term improvements. This is potential new service that TBARTA could operate in the future. I asked Tyndall Oliver, who is our Envision 2030 consultant, to run some numbers on what the operating and capital costs would be from a select number of routes that were identified in the plan. So the first 3 rows in this table are existing routes, and the other 4 are new routes that TBARTA could operate in the future. I just put these up here for illustrative purposes to give you an idea of the magnitude of cost that we would be looking at. Let me back up. Now, you might look at this list and you might say, great, do it, go get it done. Or as Captain Picard would say, make it so. Well, if it were only that easy. There are state transit funds available. There are formula funds, which, as the name implies, are apportioned to the transit agencies according to a formula. And then there's also discretionary funds, which are competitive. Some of these state funds can be used for both capital and operating expenses. But the point is, there is funds available. However, as Secretary Gwen said, and as FDOT has told us many times before, state participation is limited to 50 cents on the dollar. So how does that look on paper? Well, when it comes to capital expenses, the feds generally will pay up to 80% of the total project cost. The state will pay for half of the non-federal share. So the way the split on capital costs generally looks is 80% federal, 10% state, 10% local. The feds do allow you to use toll revenue credits as a match, and we do in fact use toll revenue credits, for example, for our van pool program. However, there's only a limited number of toll credits available to go around statewide. With operating expenses, the feds don't pay for that. So generally, the split with operating expenses, the way that looks is 50% state, 50% local. State discretionary transit funds. These are managed at the statewide level, and the competition for these funds is statewide. What that means is there's no set amount of money that comes to the district. That's very important to know, because what that means is if TBARTA were to submit a grant application, say a service development grant application for transit service, we would not be competing against HART or PSTA or PCPT. We wouldn't be taking money away from them. The more quality applications that come from District 7, the more chance there is to bring additional dollars to the region. However, it always gets back to the local match. The local match is the key. The local match is the key that unlocks the door to those state transportation funds and those different programs. So for some reason, there's a slide. Okay. I want to wrap up this presentation by going back to Envision 2030. Envision 2030 included a call to action in 3 areas: in funding, policy, and in collaboration. Under funding, the call to action includes the recommendation that to leverage new state and federal funding for transit, additional local or regional funding will be needed for TBARTA to carry out the mission set forth in the TBARTA Act and formalized in Envision 2030. Where are those additional local and regional funds going to come from? Is it going to be from additional county contribution to TBARTA? Will it be from a regional sales tax, private contribution, or something else? That direction has to come from the board. Because until we figure out the answer to that question, the simple fact is there is a wall between TBARTA and state transit funds. And that applies not just to big scale projects like the RRT, but to any type of transit service that TBARTA wants to consider implementing. Until we figure out the answer to that question, we are going to be limited to pretty much doing studies. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions you have.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for the briefing. You did mention there was 3 call to actions in that plan. You gave us the one, yeah, there's our challenge right there. And Commissioner Long, you spoke well about it in the legislative committee meeting. In going after some of these things, our biggest challenge is matching funding. To be frankly honest, our biggest challenge is funding, period. But matching contribution funding for projects and going after these is our biggest challenge. And I don't know how to solve that. So Commissioner Long.
Well, from my humble opinion, and I'm not going to regurgitate everything I've already said, but until this region is ready to move forward with a regional MPO, I just don't know how we get that done. I'm just being brutally honest, because if you look, and a year or so ago, I had a chart which I received from Whit Blanton, who's the head of our Forward Pinellas and Pinellas County. Of the 7, there were 7 major regions throughout the United States who had managed to put in place really good, effective, efficient public transportation systems. And every single one of them had a regional MPO. And some of them had 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 counties that made up the entire region. And so, you know, we are a regional board. You see the issues we have with attendance. We also have the TMA, the Transportation Management Group, that meets every other month or so. And we've had really long, drawn-out conversations about a regional MPO. And I do believe that our Speaker of the House is very favorable towards forming a regional MPO. I'm just not sure how you get that done.
Yeah, good comments. And I'm right there with you. Not sure how we get that done.
Yeah, Rich, I'd like to add too that, I mean, in my experience, the states that have done that have been far more successful in getting, is acting as a conduit for dollars for large regions of their states. And 2 states that come to mind are Texas and Georgia that have done that. And Florida needs to look at that model, but I think we're somewhat hamstrung until our legislature acts in this respect.
But the MPOs are put in place through the federal process first, correct, Harry?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, but the states can impact on how those are set up and created, though.
Correct.
In working with the federal government, even though the act is a federal act. So I think we need to certainly encourage our state leaders to do that and look at that. And the second part of that too is that, you know, Secretary Gwynn has mentioned that DOT has the funding and is ready to do projects, and the local matches have been the fundamental issue. And so in conjunction with DOT, I think that, and this is brought up once before, there needs to be a renewed interest in the SIS and activating that to the full extent of its potential, the way it was originally created for strategic importance, projects that are statewide significance as well as just regional significance. And among those can be some transit projects, but again, the state DOT needs to focus on that. We're somewhat hamstrung in what we can do with that too.
Right. Right. Brian, again, nice wrap up. Thank you very much. I guess for the committee right here, and for those online that are part of the full board, do we need to start looking at how do we communicate that with the local MPOs and with our state legislator legislators, if you will?
Yes.
And if so, should we have that as a due out? And I'm looking at David down there at the end of the table. And if you've got any kind of insights or thoughts going forward with this, because obviously this is something that hamstrings all of us in this region, not just TBARTA. And I didn't know if we have done a little bit of that already, sowed any seeds, or if this is something we need to move forward with in terms of how do we communicate that? How do we at least start that conversation if it's not already started?
I don't think the conversation is formally started. I think it's informally happened throughout the region amongst different agencies. But I don't think the agencies and all of the organizations collectively have ever come together and had that conversation.
Okay. So maybe, you know, and I'll throw it on the table, maybe we look at coming up with a strategy to at least formally start some of that conversation. And I would say, let's look at that internally first here, and then present that to the board, and then we move forward in seeing how we might be able to do that. If that's a viable alternative, and I'm now looking back at Commissioner Long saying, for this one right now, it might be the first step of many, but at least it's a step.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my opinion, I think that's the roadblock that keeps us from moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard Secretary Gwynn say on more than one occasion, and Harry, we had that same message when you came with us, Mr. Chair, to DC. All of the federal agencies, as it relates to working through a transportation project, want to know that you're speaking with one voice and one message. And I think the Department of Transportation wants to know the same thing when they're allocating funds, don't they, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, I certainly think it is helpful to have the region speak. We speak bigger as a region than we do individual counties.
Yeah.
Just one more, and I'll ask our legislative rep over there, are we going to encounter a lot of pushback on this in terms from at least our legislators as they look at this?
On the federal side or on the?
Federal.
I don't know that I think the federal side actually likes the idea of the regionality. I think it makes it easier for them because they can get behind projects. I think where you may encounter more of a problem is on the county by county side. But I think on the federal side, I think the delegation likes when you come together advocating for a project that helps the entire area, that they're able to advocate for you then.
Okay, and thank you. And thanks, Harry. And I don't know if Ron's still on the phone, but your thoughts from the state side?
Yeah, we are, Mr. Chairman. I think the pushback will be locally. I think, I think that'd be the biggest issue, is getting all of the counties to be part of something to agree upon it. My understanding is this is something that can't be changed from the state perspective. It has to be, so the state just can't pass something. So you would need the federal and the local entities to all agree on what that new structure would look like.
Okay. All right. And thanks, Ron. Thanks, Harry. I appreciate it. So David, just, I don't think we need a motion. I think let's just look at a strategy to kind of start maybe some of the formal conversation. And if we can bring that back to the policy committee, maybe next board or next meeting, that would be great. At least let's have a little kind of update where we're at, kind of thing. So, okay. And if the committee doesn't mind, I think I might go ahead and alter our rest of our agenda. And unless anything in item 6 needs to be brought up right now, we'll go ahead and move towards adjournment of the meeting. That way we'll have a 5-minute pad before our board starts. So I'll look at Chris and Diane. Any issues with moving this to the next committee meeting? Okay. All right. No, I don't hear any. So any other business before we adjourn? Okay. Seeing none. Future meeting subjects. I think we have one right there, and then we'll bring item 6 back on, both items for item 6 back on to the next committee meeting. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the policy committee. Thank you.
Call the meeting to order, please. Commissioner Bellamy, can you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Jennifer, please call the roll.
Jim Holton,
Here.
Cliff Manuel, Commissioner Long,
Here.
Mayor Castor, Mayor Kreisman, Rich McLean,
Here.
Commissioner Kemp,
Here.
Commissioner Starkey, Commissioner Starkey, are you present?
Here, but the sound goes in and out, so I'll do my best.
Okay. Commissioner Bellamy,
Here.
Commissioner Navarrete, Secretary Gwen,
Here.
and for Secretary Nandam, I thought we were going to have Nicole Mills present. Is she present there as well? Okay, all right, we can go ahead and proceed. We do not have a quorum.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you please give the PSA regarding public comment?
Persons wishing to address the board can do so in either of two ways. Comments no more than 400 words may be sent to publiccomments@tbarta.com and will be read into the record. Written comments must be received no later than the day before the meeting. Comments must include the name, address, organization, and topic or agenda item. You may also see staff prior to the meeting to complete a comment card. You will be able to provide comment for 3 minutes when recognized.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And I have received 2 cards from folks wishing to make public comment. Chair recognizes first Jonathan Robertson. Please address the board from that podium. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board. Welcome to Manatee County. Hope you like it here today. I'm Jonathan Robertson, Transit Planning Manager with Manatee County Area Transit. And I just wanted to give you all as a board and an organization a thank you. In August of 2020, you may recall you passed a resolution in support of our grant application for enhanced service on our Route 99 US 41. We just found out in the FDOT work program that has been funded. And as you know, that's one of the busiest bus corridors down here in Manatee, Sarasota County, over 500,000 trips a year. And one of definitely the highest ridership bus route in the area. And it's a good look and a big thank you to you guys for your support on that. I think it's a good project for FDOT District 1 and for the county and for Sarasota County. But that's really all I had to say. We'd look at kicking off this enhanced service next year. And as you know, our MPO has had capital funds for this service programmed for a number of years. So everything added up, and this improves mobility in the region. And thanks again.
Thanks for those comments.
You bet.
Very much. Next up is David Hutchison.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the TBARTA board. On behalf of the Sarasota Manatee Metropolitan Planning Organization, I want to also echo Jonathan's thanks for your support of their application and including it in your priorities. We appreciate the coordination that your staff participates in with not just our MPO, but the regional MPOs and the Chair's Coordinating Committee routinely. And so we have multiple layers and levels of coordination with TBARTA. And we know that as we go forward, we're not going to be able to continue to provide mobility on the roads for everybody. We're going to need more and more transit. So we look forward to utilizing these key corridors increasingly in the future, and we appreciate your support and what you do. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Jennifer, anyone else wishing to make public comment, or is there anyone in the audience that would like to make public comment?
I do have a public comment we received via email, so I can go ahead and read that into the record if you're ready.
Yes.
Okay, we received this from Peter James. Dear board members, I am commenting on the upcoming gondola feasibility study item on your January 22nd agenda. I would ask the board to consider expanding the study to include personal rapid transit PRT and group rapid transit GRT models of transit. ccaway.net describes guideways in more detail. The second video on the website on the Heathrow PRT system is very informative. It mentions the ability to drive pods off the guideway to your final destination, making guideways accessible to all. And that's the end.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Is that it, Jennifer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess there's no other public comments, so we'll move on. Unfortunately, our new board member, Commissioner Navarud, was unable to join us today, but we welcome her and look forward to her participation, hopefully in the next meeting, and she can then tell us a little bit more about herself. Next item up is consent agenda items. Absent a quorum, we are unable to vote on that today, so we'll move directly into discussion and or other action items. First up is the Citizens Advisory Committee report.
Bill Roberts is on Zoom.
Bill, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you, board members, for giving us this opportunity to report on the Citizens Advisory Committee activity. We held our regular meeting last month. We have no recommendations to forward to the board at this time, but I do have a report on some of the activity that took place at the meeting. We saw presentations on the legislative update, which Ron Pierce was kind enough to provide. The committee saw a presentation on the St. Petersburg mobility study, which this board is familiar with, as well as the TD Tampa Bay project. So we have been briefed on all of those. The Citizens Advisory Committee then moved into a working session where we afforded the committee members an opportunity to have an open, free-flowing discussion about how the committee might be continually improving its effectiveness and its support of your board. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to convey a few of the comments and suggestions that were made as a result of that workshop.
Please do.
The Citizens Advisory Committee is very committed to public transportation and public transit. The CAC is certainly focused on the big picture, the regional picture. Although many of our representatives on the CAC are appointed by each individual county, they nonetheless are taking and want to continue to take a very large regional approach. One comment that was made was that they would encourage the continued investigation of a rail transit system leading up to Brooksville in Hernando County. And I know that issue comes up from time to time. They are encouraging the TBARTA board as well as the CAC to stay focused on transit and to look at broad areas of improving regional transit while continuing to coordinate with the various MPOs in each county in order to facilitate a free-flowing, smooth system. The CAC also expressed a willingness and a desire to have greater interaction with the board and the board members. So to the extent that you would like your CAC to review or make recommendations on various projects, please feel free to convey that information through the staff. And then interestingly enough, one CAC member recommended that a CAC member be a member of the TBARTA board, which you may find an interesting proposal. So that's kind of a summary of our most recent meeting. We're going to meet again in February, and I'll be happy to take any questions that the board might have.
Thank you, Bill, for that report. Members, any questions for Bill? None being heard. Thanks, Bill, for that. And we look forward to hearing from you at our next meeting.
Thank you, Chairman Holton.
Next up is the Transit Management Committee report. And Kurt, you're recognized.
Hello, Board. Kurt Scheibel, Transit. Looking at a couple of things that were presented, you'll see some of those, but we had some really good discussion under our new business section. Specifically, we talked about a regional ADA type of service for how can TBARTA help organize that and alleviate some of the cross-county issues more than what we've already gone into. So we had a very lively discussion with a lot of different people from all the different agencies. Also, we looked at, Brian gave a really good discussion, led a really good discussion on the, what can TBARTA do for us, i.e. all the transit systems around there. How can they help do regional transit studies that we thought of, or that he had a couple of suggestions that we can do to move forward and make some things happen. One of the things that was really talked a lot about, I would say, had a lively discussion, was about cybersecurity and in what we do inside our individual things, and how can we prevent people from getting in and hacking our information we have to, or shutting us down, as has happened in other locations across the country. There are some other discussions on various other things like more connections between the counties and so forth. Bar that, I have no other things for the board or any questions for me.
Thank you, Kurt. Members, any questions for Kurt? Okay, thank you for that report, and we'll look forward to hearing from you at our next meeting. I'm happy to see that Commissioner Navarrete has been able to join the meeting. Commissioner, welcome. We look forward to working with you. Would you like to make a few comments about yourself to the board?
Her microphone is muted right now. Let me see.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I was evidently clicking. I just was watching on YouTube. And then when I heard you say I wasn't there, I figured out I needed to be somewhere else. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you.
But I'm here. So, well, hi, my name is Beth Narvarud. I'm a new commissioner in Hernando County. I'm very happy to be here and hopeful that we can make some great progress together.
Well, thanks so much for that. And we look forward to working with you and hopefully meeting you at our next meeting.
Yes.
Moving forward, our next up is the Legislative Subcommittee report, and Commissioners Long and Starkey, please lead us. Janet, are you or Catherine going to speak first, or both, or just you?
Well, Catherine was on the line. Catherine, do you want to give the report?
No, you go ahead. The sound is in and out here.
All right. Well, okay. We had a great conversation and report from our federal lobbyist, Harry Glenn and Steve Palmer, about the dollars that are available from the new administration, or potentially available from the new administration for transit. And we also had got some really great information about the fact that for our transit agencies, there's going to be between 35 and 25 million for electric buses, should you wish to go in that direction. We had a update from Ron Pierce from RSA with our state legislative initiative and an appropriation request for $1,500,000. They're also advocating for dollars from general revenue so that we won't have to keep going back after additional monies. But the new Speaker Sprouse, wants to ensure that there's a 50% match coming from somewhere. We talked about all of the different places that we may be able to get additional monies to include forming a regional MPO. There was a lot of discussion about the lack of attendance from our board and how critical it is, because with all the different issues that we're working on, we're not able to, we haven't been able to take a formal vote since October. Senator Roussan is carrying our message in the Senate, and Representative Mariano is our House sponsor. And, oh, we also had some conversation about the DOT work plan that was supposed to start in 2024 has now been delayed to 2026. Nobody's happy about that. But Secretary Gwynn seems to think there might be some hope on the horizon with additional funds maybe that they find somewhere. Did I get that right?
Yes, we don't have any certainty on that, but we're hopeful that as additional funds come back into the program, that they'll be used for projects that got moved out.
Excellent, thank you. And lastly, we were informed by our executive director that all of the participating counties have paid their matching dollars. And that's the end of my legislative report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that. Members, any questions for Commissioner Long? None being heard, we'll move on to the next report, which is Finance Committee. And Janet, you're continually recognized.
Yes, and so I think many of you who have served on this board, thank you, Mr. Chair, for a long time, know that we have worked really, really hard on our finances. And I'm very happy to report that we actually have money in the bank now. And just give me 1 minute and I'm going to tell you how much that is. $575,206.20. Thank you, Melanie, for that. Oh, there you are, over there. For that great work to make sure that we're paying all our bills. And I'm very happy to hear that all of our bills have been paid and that we're going to continue paying them, hopefully on time. That's the end of my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that report. Members, any questions for Commissioner Long on finance? Okay, none being heard, we'll move on to the Policy Committee report, and Rich McLean is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did have an abbreviated Policy Committee meeting. The one item we did discuss in a briefing presented by Brian Presario was the regional transit improvements and implementation challenges we have. And as Commissioner Long mentioned, that sparked a continuation of the regional MPO discussion we had prior during the legislative meeting, and with a small due out from the TBARTA CEO on possible communication efforts in that regard. So outside of that, Chair, we did move item 6, which was a DBE program goals discussion and a transit working proclamation, to the following committee meeting. So they'll be discussed at the next Policy Committee meeting. With that, that's all I had, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Rich, for that. Members, any questions for Rich on policy? Okay, none being heard, we'll move right along. The chairman's report, I have nothing specifically to report other than to echo Commissioner Long's comments that we need to encourage all members to please attend these board meetings. We have been without a quorum for 2 meetings, and that doesn't bode well for getting our funding done or getting our projects moved along quickly. So thanks for all those members that were able to attend, and we will work with you the best we can to do that. Commissioner Bellamy.
Mr. Chair, I just sat here and thought about that because I've had some issues with some of the boards that I've been a part of. And in reference to some of the people that are absent, is there a way that they could possibly, and I'm just throwing something out there so we can kind of have the representation so the communication can get out and we can continue to move forward. But is there a way that some of these individuals, for example, a mayor, I'm not going to call any names, a mayor can assign a designee with the intent for us, and maybe my man from the legal standpoint, he just jumped up, so he's going to tell me, no, we can't do it. But anyway, can assign a designee to represent them in respect of, for all the things that's going on, to make sure the information is going back and forth, as well as potentially, stand in for a quorum if we need it. I'm just asking.
It's a very great suggestion. I think that's part of our legislative package because we don't have the specific statutory authority to do that now, but we've been asking for that. And maybe Ron or Alan can comment on that a little bit.
I mean, I would just say that our statute used to allow that. Then they deleted that authorization for the mayors to designate an alternate. And Ron is now in his second year trying to get the legislature to consider an amendment to the act that created TBARTA to allow the mayors to designate an alternate to attend board meetings.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it was just a thought.
No, it's a great thought, and I think we're all on board with doing that. And because these mayors are so, especially with COVID, are so busy right now, they can't break away sometimes, and they've got other pressing business. And certainly they should be able to send a representative, in my view, to get things done. I have nothing else to report other than to hopefully we can get these quorum issues and so forth resolved in the next legislative session and move on. That being said, David, I'll recognize you for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We spoke earlier at one of the committee meetings about the aerial gondola feasibility study. And for the full board, I'd like to report that we are finalizing the RFP for that study, which will be issued on February 1st. This is being done with Ford Pinellas and staff from the cities of Clearwater and St. Petersburg. Proposals are due by March the 8th, and we will bring a recommendation for contract award to the Finance Committee and board meetings in April. Second, I want to announce that we are finalizing our 2020 annual report. This is something that we started last year and hope to have ready to distribute by next Friday. Next, I'd like to mention a survey that we're distributing through area chambers of commerce and other partners to see how the pandemic impacted commute behavior over the past year. And as importantly, if businesses anticipate other changes as we move through 2021. If there's one thing that we learned in 2020, it's that employees can in fact work as effectively from home as in the office. So it'll be interesting to see what employer expectations are moving forward. And then lastly, I'd like to remind everybody about our van pool webinars next week. We have two different formats. One is targeted to former van poolers whose van pools were disrupted in 2020 with the intent of bringing them back into the program. The other is designed for new van poolers and people who may be interested in learning more about it. And this is part of our effort this year of expanding outreach with virtual tools that so many people have become accustomed to recently versus coordinating physical events at employer offices that many people just aren't comfortable with yet. We have no new future meeting topics, although we did receive a request to reschedule the Safe Trip presentation that was originally intended for today to the April meeting. And unless there are any other questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, David. Members, any questions for David? Okay, none being heard, we'll move along. Next presentation is going to be on the TD Tampa Bay, and Chris Jadek, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, board members, thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you today. I've had the opportunity over the past couple of years to present several times to the board. This may be my most enjoyable presentation because I'm about to tell you about a service that we are providing right now and tell you about people who are being helped through regional transportation that TBARTA is providing, and that is TD Tampa Bay. The TD stands for Transportation Disadvantaged, and that means people who qualify for additional transit and transportation services due to age, income, and disability. It's a small program, but it's growing and it's regional and it's helping people right now. So with that, I want to walk you through the program and give you some details on what it is. TBARTA is working in partnership with USERV. USERV is an adaptive transportation provider experienced. They provide the drivers, they provide the service. TBARTA coordinates with them by coordinating with our counties. Most notably, user provided rides through an Advantage Ride program. Now they're working on us to provide rides across our 5-county region. The funding for this program comes from a special grant that comes from the CTD, the Florida Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged. It's important to note that every county has its own CTC service, Community Transportation Coordinators, providing service within counties to this population of people who qualify as transportation disadvantaged. But there were gaps in the program regionally because counties, for the most part, are only transporting within county lines. So if you qualify as transportation disadvantaged and you're in, say, Pasco County and you need to get to Moffitt Cancer Center, there's not readily a service available to provide that ride. Well, that's what TD Tampa Bay is designed to do, to provide regional transportation for that population, not certainly replace the great work that the CTCs are doing, but to complement what they do, to work with them, to fill in the gaps, and to provide this regional transportation. So as mentioned, we do work in coordination with all the local CTCs. I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. Our primary service is that county-to-county transportation. So if during the day, someone calls us up and says, hey, I live in Manatee County and I want to go to another destination in Manatee County, we won't provide that service because, of course, MCAT is providing that right here in Manatee County. So we're not doing the same thing that they do, and that's not our purpose. However, if a person in Manatee County needs to go to Pinellas or Hillsborough or Pasco, that would be a ride that we could provide to them because the MCAT TD services do not currently provide for that. So we are complementing the existing local services and not taking away any of that local service. We do provide a secondary service, and that would be in-county transportation on weekends and evenings when that local CTC might not be operating. So the local CTC decides what hours it wants to operate. It operates from 9 to 5. It provides the in-county service. But TD Tampa Bay has the ability, because drivers are available on some weekend and Sunday hours, to fill in an additional gap and provide some in-county service, but only when the local CTCs are not operating. We work very closely with the CTCs and we're cooperative with them. So this is a very much a cooperative agreement and a great relationship that we're developing right now. Transportation disadvantage, this is the Florida statutes defining what it is. I won't read it word for word, but I want you to know that our service aligns exactly with what transportation disadvantage is as defined by the Florida statutes. And we follow the same directives as the local CTCs do in qualifying people for this service. There's a qualification procedure for the CTCs, the same for us as well. We started off by doing some marketing. We launched this program in December. We got the grant, I think, in October. We ramped up, started in December. And one of the things we had to do was let people know that this service is available. So I'm going to walk through some of the marketing and outreach we did, and I'm going to show you some of the statistics on the ridership that we've been getting in the initial weeks. First of all, there is a web page on our website, the TD Tampa Bay, that you can go to that has a lot of resources as to what you would have in part of this program. We've developed some marketing materials for the CTCs as well that we are handing out, flyers that will go to riders who might ride in county to let them know there's an additional service that you can be helped with. Pinellas County actually did some robocalls for us, reaching out to their population. So we're working with the CTCs to market this program as well. And of course, we've done a media release and we have a number of social media postings. As you'll see from the numbers in a minute, the service impact is starting small, but it is growing. This is a little bit closer look at what the website looks like. And I'll draw your attention to the right side of the screen. You'll notice there are tabs for each of the counties because the service will vary, especially when it comes to evening or weekend service, depending upon what each local CTC does. So in this case, we've pulled up what the page is for Manatee County. And if a person goes to this, they will immediately see that MCAT is providing that transportation disadvantage service in Manatee County. And that's where we want people to go first, to use that as their primary provider. And then, of course, the page would go down to talk about what TD Tampa Bay can provide for people in Manatee County in addition to the MCAT services. The webpage also has frequently asked questions. I won't go into all those right now, but certainly if you had more questions, it's a great resource to say, what is TD service? How do I qualify? When can I ride? What is the cost? All that information is posted on the website. As mentioned before, we follow the same criteria as all the local CTCs and what the state requires to qualify you as transportation disadvantaged based on either age, income, or disability. This is a little close-up of the form. It very closely mirrors what the local CTCs are offering, but you have to provide, obviously, your contact information, if you are under income and qualify as income disadvantaged, you'd have to provide some proof of that. We do provide a lot of rides to individuals who through a disability might need additional transportation service. And that is one great thing about USERV. There are certainly ambulatory services, but there are also wheelchair accessible services that we're providing too. So we're also helping that population as well in that regard. And of course, we sent out some flyers. This is just a quick look at some of the flyers we've done that are being distributed by the local CTCs to their riders to get the word out. We've done some newsletter information mentioned here. These are things that the counties are also helping us out with. We very much appreciate that. So now I want to take a look at really kind of what our response has been. As mentioned, we started off small. We launched on December 1st. And of course, we didn't do any marketing prior to that. So getting the word out took a little time to grow. But in December, you can see the very first week, we did 3 trips. Then we did 5. Then we did 15. And then we did 40. In January, there was a slight pause over the holidays, but the January trips continue to grow. And through January so far, we have, I think, more than doubled what our December output has been. We did 60 trips in the most recently measured week as well. So if you take a look at this on the graph, you can see the solid line are trips completed. The dotted line represents trip requests. Sometimes for various reasons, a person might cancel a request after they make it. But you can see it pretty much follows the same trend, that with the exception of that week between Christmas and New Year's, our popularity is growing, and we expect that to continue to grow over the next few months. In terms of who's using this service, I'm happy to say that people are using it in each of TBARTA's 5 counties. And for the most part, it pretty much follows along our population breakdown. More people are using it in Hillsborough. That's our largest county population-wide at 49%. You might look at that and say, well, Pinellas also very large population. Why is that only 17%? But I would point out that PSTA provides 24/7 TD services. So we are not providing weekend or evening service to TD riders in Pinellas because PSTA covers that. But some of the other local CTCs do not. And so we pick up some rides regarding that. You can see on the chart on the left, the trips are broken down there. For the full month of December, we did a total of 70 rides. And January, as I mentioned, only through the first 17 days, we've already exceeded that at 120 rides as well. This is a little bit more of a breakdown. I should mention, we're gathering a lot of statistics for this program because we're in a pilot project phase now. We're funded through June 30th through the state, and we will go back in the spring and we will take some of this documentation of what we've learned over the first few months, and we're going to look to apply this to extend the program. The idea being that we want to work with USERV over the next couple of years, and eventually, I believe 3 years down the line, the idea would be we might hand off this transit service to TBARTA for operating. USERV would hand that off to us. But first, we've got to get to the point where we're providing the service more on just a trial basis. And right now, the grant funds us through June 30th. So it's very important for us to capture this information to see why are people using it, where are they going. And we're working with Cutter. Cutter is analyzing this information, and it's going to provide an independent report to this. I'll talk you through this graph very quickly. You notice that we're gathering information on trips by purpose. So understandably, a lot of the trips are for medical purposes. A lot are for jobs. So social activities certainly make up a lot of that as well. Not a lot of school activities. I will tell you, we were not capturing for school in December, but we added that category on. And given where we are with COVID, we expect that to pick up as COVID protocols change in the months ahead. And of course, there are some shopping categories too as well. When we look at trip type, you can see how many cross-county trips we provided. And that is our core purpose, to get people from one county to another. And 131 of those 190 trips did qualify as cross-county. You see the categories for evening and weekend services as well. You may say, well, if I add those numbers up, that comes to more than 190. Why is that more? Some trips can be in more than one category. If you're going cross-county on a Saturday, you would check the box as being a weekend and a cross-county trip. So that's why you see those numbers add up to more than that. And of course, we're also capturing some of the numbers in terms of cost efficiencies there. Those are data that we want to take a look at and analyze to make sure that this is a cost-effective program. A couple more statistics right now. You can see ambulatory rides are 81%, but wheelchair accessible, those who need assistance, are also making up about 20% of what we do. Average trip length, average travel time, and our on-time percentage, close to 100%, 99.2%. I'm going to open up for questions here, but I will add that Steve Holmes, who is our person who works with us, the user, he's the project manager there and oversees that, works with us along with Chris Dianuntis, also are here to answer some questions about that. But I want to share with you a phone call that I received very early on that kind of represents what we're doing. Back in December, I got a call from someone who represented somebody who had cerebral palsy, and this individual wanted to work and lived in Hillsborough County, but the only job they could find was in Pinellas County. They made $75 a day. They were spending $60 a day in Uber rides to get to that job. But they did that even though they were only pocketing $15 a day because that person wanted to work. Through this program, the cost per ride is $6 each way. We use that for a local match that's part of this grant. But this person is able to use that ride, go anywhere in our region for $6. We really feel that this is empowering and helping people who need public transit and transportation services the most. As mentioned, it's small, but from acorns grow oak trees. And we're hopeful that this program will continue to grow, but it really represents the spirit of what TBARTA is all about. I know we have bigger goals to accomplish and we need to do that, but I'm very proud that we're serving people here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Chris. And to your point, a 1,000-mile journey begins with one step, and this is a great first step for us. I think Commissioner Long has a question.
Yes, Chris, thank you for that presentation. Since I also serve on the PSTA board, and you mentioned PSTA, I'm curious about whether or not you or anyone from TBARTA has talked to PSTA about the possibility of sharing the client list and then taking care of those rides, and that way the client only has to apply once.
And that's a very good point, and we absolutely have had a lot of conversations like that. Chris may have more information about our conversations with PSTA, but we are dealing with Ross and Bonnie Epstein over there as well. So we've had a number of conversations with them, and they've been very cooperative and very helpful us in this process. So we do want to share that list. I will tell you that different counties have take a different approach as to whether they want to share the list. They feel in some ways they might not be able to share that information, but that is what we desire. We would like to have one unified application process so people would qualify for all the TD services that they are eligible for, since eligibility is the same. But right now I will tell you, and probably because this program starting off is a little fragmented, I think as we get our feet beneath us, I think that will solidify, but that's a very good point. I don't know if Chris or Steve Holmes, who is on the line, can provide additional information on that. Would you like to come up and give me a chance?
Well, wait, I have another
Sure, go ahead.
question before he comes up, if you don't mind. In another chapter in my life, I was part of the administrative team at a Catholic high school. And this particular school had students that came from Hillsborough County and from Pasco County. And one of the biggest issues they faced was getting the students back and forth in the morning coming to school and then in the afternoon going home. And ever since I've been on this board and heard about the commuter assistance program, I couldn't help but wonder if it wasn't an opportunity to provide those kind of services for those schools that are not part of the public school system.
I think it would be if they qualify as transportation disadvantaged due to age, income, or disability. Absolutely.
Okay, just a thought.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if Chris would like to add just another comment on that.
Yes, I would just add that the CTD is requiring an additional application process. Not to say that that will be the norm going forward as we learn more, but yeah, for this program, the CTD is requiring an additional application process.
I have a question.
Yes, recognized.
Thank you. Just in response to the school, I think our schools are already, I know in Hillsborough County, and I know it's under state, that the state matches the school buses, and they won't even transport anybody under 2 miles. And it's been a crisis for us in Hillsborough County, especially with some of the dangerous walking conditions and whatever else. But we have a huge amount of our budget that, even though it originally was a state provided service, that is the school budget that has to be set aside just for our own students, much less students between counties. But I just wondered, what is the budget for this for the first 6 months? And, can you please share that with us?
Steve or Chris, can you answer the question regarding the budget? Hey, Steve, are you on the line?
Yes, Chris, I am. Thank you. Thank you for the question. The budget for the first year is $907,000.
You said for the first year, so that's like from last June to this June?
That's for this fiscal year, which finishes on June 30th. And
So that was that's more or less like a 6-month budget or an
Correct.
8-month budget?
Yes, ma'am. And so we'll be applying again in the April timeframe for a grant beginning on the 1st of July. And I'm sure depending on the results that we see this year and the need, we will adjust the budget moving forward for a 12-month allocation beginning on July 1st.
Has this affected the budget for these services in any of the counties? Have their budgets remained the same or increased?
This money, really good question, and that comes up a number of times. This budget comes out of the Innovation and Service Development Grant as part of the Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged. It does not come out of the Trip and Equipment Grant. So there are two separate pots of money. So no, it does not impact it does not take any money away from the community transportation coordinators, but it does add additional services in those counties for people that they serve.
But that's only a 3-year type of service. So after 3 years, because I find this so often that, these grants go for 3 years, as was mentioned actually in this conversation, people get geared up, they're given the service, which, great. But then after 3 years, it shuts down and it's thrown to the locals to fund or do. So I don't know if you could speak to that.
Well, one of the goals in the overall 2030 plan is to look at funding regional transportation. And so in the next, as we learn more about the need in the program across the region, we'll learn more about the budgeting factors, and then we'll be able to see also what the funding may be in the future for those those trips that may occur 3 years and out. But I'll also mention there's a lot of folks who need services now, not 3 years from now. So as we focus on helping people now, maybe we can pull them out of their transportation disadvantaged situation and handle the situation of funding, in a little more in the future. But we will learn more through this next year and a half, and really determine what the need is and what the budget will be moving forward.
Yeah, well, no doubt. We want to provide all kinds of services, and I'm sure people need it now and would want it now. I'm just, looking at the future. Do we know, can you give us the cost per trip on average cost per trip?
Chris, can you bring up the slide? I think it was the cost per trip on the slide.
I'll need a moment to bring that back up, but sure.
Yeah, the slides were difficult to see, by the way. I don't know if everybody had that problem, but I know some people did. They're blurry, those slides. So you might have to read it.
If I remember, as Chris is bringing it up, as I remember right, the cost per trip for a 21-mile average trip is right around $49 to $50, if I remember off the top of my head. But Chris is bringing it up there.
29 miles is the average trip.
21 miles. 21
miles,
miles
and it's $49.
Chris, what's the figure? So I can't read the numbers.
I'll read this figure for you. So our cost efficiency, cost per trip, $51.92. Cost per trip for the ambulatory service in December was $45.57 and $48.82 in January. It is higher for those for wheelchair accessible rides, as you can see, $75.21. And the cost per revenue mile $2.53.
So the young person going to, or the person going to from Hillsborough to Pinellas, and not that just earning the job is everything, but they're $75 a day they're being paid, but their trip may cost anywhere from $104 to $150 a day.
If they're taking a wheelchair accessible vehicle, that would be the average cost. One of the reasons why the wheelchair costs are expensive in this one little small data point is we had some people take some trips from Pasco County to Manatee County, which inflated the number a little bit. We'll know more about their actual costs as we develop the trips over the next 3 months.
Right. But even if they weren't, it would be $104 a day, or actually $6, but correct? If it was just 21 miles, but if it was more, it would be more.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
What's the point?
Members, any other questions? Thanks for that presentation, guys. That concludes our presentation. Is there any old or new business to come before the board?
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there's one more presentation.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, there absolutely is. Scott. Scott's giving us update on the RRT milestone number 3. My apologies, Scott. I got ahead of myself without my glasses.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board. Great to see everybody in person. As identified, Scott Pringle with WSP. I do have an update on the Regional Rapid Transit Project for you this morning. Obviously, we're looking at that regional mobility. It's been the purpose all along. And where we stand right now is we're actually reaching our 3rd major milestone in the project of the 5. And that is the identification of a locally preferred alternative. Now, this locally preferred alternative is a result of the last 6 to 8 months worth of work where we've done a significant amount of preliminary engineering, looking at the stations and doing some early environmental work in preparation for what will be milestone 4. So what is a locally preferred alternative? The locally preferred alternative that we're recommending today is one part, it's the alignment and their approach to the alignment. So how does it operate in the interstate? And the second part of that is, where are the stations? Where do we think the preferred location is for the stations, and how do we serve each one of those communities along the corridor? And what this does is it gives us the opportunity to go ahead and launch into milestone 4, which is actually a detailed environmental analysis of the entire project following the federal guidelines and regulations. So as the board remembers, in this past summer, I think June, we had the last conversation about the alignment. We identified moving these 3 alternatives forward. That is alternative 1, 3, and 5. Alternative 1 is our baseline. So this is always going to be our point of comparison for the project as we move throughout the lifespan of the project, which is express bus along the entire 41-mile corridor. So really the conversation is really kind of falling around alternatives 3 and 5, where everything in purple that you see on the map here is what we call freeway-based dedicated BRT lanes. And the only difference between the two is that alternative 3 is not looking at a dedicated BRT lane across the Howard Franklin Bridge. Instead, we would actually maximize FDOT's investment in the bridge today, looking at using those express lanes, whereas alternative 5 includes a dedicated lane across the Howard Franklin Bridge. Now, when we compare these alternatives against each other, you can see the travel times here as well as the overall ridership. And really what we came down to is which one of these alternatives is going to be most competitive for that FTA grant potential. And really it comes down to alternative 3. When we look at the cost associated with a dedicated lane across the Howard Franklin Bridge, as you would imagine, it is quite expensive. Upwards of $200 million. And when you add that onto the project cost, it really kind of kicks us out of contention for being what the federal government considers cost effective. So our recommendation and for discussion today, obviously, is that we move forward with alternative 3 and advance that into the next stage of the project. This is, again, the description of alternative 3. A quick reminder, looking at as much dedicated as we can possibly get. We're getting about, 35 miles of dedicated lane all the way from Pasco to downtown St. Pete. And again, coordinating with the department, looking at using the best we can get out of the new bridge across the Howard Franklin Bridge. So a big part of the work that we've been focused on over the past several months, 6 months, is the stations. So we've really gotten into a lot more detail in terms of prototype design for a number of different stations and start looking at what our opportunities are. When I last talked to you, I believe in November, I gave you a presentation of some of those locations and how we were working with your stakeholders to identify what could be a preferred station location. And we've continued this cost benefit analysis. So now we've got a lot more detail on what these different station prototypes cost. And we can evaluate that against how it serves the neighborhood, how productive it is in terms of ridership. So that's really been our focus. And I'm going to walk you through each one of those station areas and let you know what our recommendation is in terms of a preferred station location. Before I do that, I do have some images. So really comes down to 2 prototypes. We're always going to connect to the intermodal centers that FDOT is looking at proposing. Those are generally offline, so we would get out of the interstate and make a direct connection to those. That's a big advantage for this project to be able to serve those intermodal centers. Outside of those intermodal centers, then the focus becomes the other neighborhood stations, as it were. And the question is the station at street level or a neighborhood prototype, which you see shown here on the screen, which could be a block or half a block off the interstate. But again, the benefit there is it's at street level. You can walk to it, you can bike to it, you can transfer from local transit very easily to this particular prototype. The second prototype is where we're actually immediately adjacent to the interstate. So you can see it represented here where the transit vehicle is actually continuing up and down the interstate. However, it does make a quick stop, pulls off into a platform that's up above at interstate level. And we do have this opportunity for internal circulation, get down to the street level, again, making sure that we can connect to those neighborhoods, allow people to have that opportunity to walk, bike, and transfer to it. In this particular prototype, we actually even have the opportunity for some potential first floor retail to serve those patrons and make sure that they have the amenities they need to continue to want to come back and use the service. So as we start going down through the corridor, we're going to start in Pasco County, and you'll see on the slide, I've got a description of the prototype that were recommended in each station area, the location, as well as the number of transit-dependent populations. So we're always looking at equity and making sure that, especially a project like this, it's particularly important to serve transit-dependent neighborhoods. So we have some statistics there. And of course, what we think roughly what the parking need is. And as we move forward, and again, as we talked in the last meeting, that need we're looking to offset on parking in terms of partnerships with private entities and shared parking strategies. So in State Route 54, we are looking at being adjacent to the Grove. There's a great opportunity there. There's a lot of synergy. There's a couple of parcels that have plenty of size that could easily accommodate what we need to do there. Being the end of the line or the beginning of the line, as it were, we need to turn those vehicles around, have some back-end operations. So we've got some really great opportunities there. Moving down, so that would be a neighborhood station. Now moving down to State Route 56, what we're looking at is directly connecting to the FDOT Intermodal Center. As those proposals come online, we can adjust our service to directly connect to wherever the intermodal center is. But what we're seeing from the regional standpoint, great opportunity. If we look to partner with PCPT, they have a stop already at the Tampa Premium Outlets, obviously a major activity center there and some great opportunities to serve the community. Moving into Hillsborough County, first is Bears. Again, we're looking at a neighborhood station here. We found that being off the interstate on the east side of the corridor really gave us a great connection to the communities nearby and really served a lot of those neighborhoods. So we're looking at approximately near the intersection of Bears and Nebraska. Again, you can see the folks that we're able to serve there and how much parking we're proposing. The USF area, another intermodal center. So again, we're looking to wherever FDOT eventually constructs that intermodal center or the partnership that constructs that intermodal center, connect there directly. Some of the early recommendations and conversations, again, is focusing on the east side of the interstate near Nebraska. So we'd want to absolutely connect there as well. Waters and Bird. So now we're moving further south in the corridor. This we're actually recommending the inline station. We evaluated both the neighborhood prototype and the inline. They both produce very well in terms of ridership. But the reality is to have a station at street level would require us to get off at Bird Street, connect to that station, and the next entry point, if you're moving northward on the corridor, isn't all the way up until Bush Boulevard, because you have a half interchange on Bird Street and the other side is up at Bush. So that obviously creates a lot of extra travel time. So what the process here, the thought is, since we're seeing good productivity from both prototypes, let's look at the additional investment to have an inline station there so that we can have that efficient service for the project. And there's lots of economic development opportunities right there next to the interstate, whether it's the old Kmart on the west side or the dog track on the east side. So this is one of those recommendations where we're actually looking at potentially an inline station rather than a neighborhood prototype. Moving further south to the Heights area, we had those great conversations with the public in which we heard very clearly the public wanted us to keep a very small footprint in the Heights neighborhood, something that's walkable, bikeable, easy to access via transit. So the concept here is, again, get out of the interstate, get down to street level, have the opportunity to connect or co-locate potentially with the Hart Arterial BRT, which is something that's being studied by Hart right now, and a great opportunity to serve that neighborhood. Again, moving to downtown Tampa, intermodal center. Get out of the interstate, connect to that downtown intermodal center, which is a critical piece of the overall project, and then move forward. Moving west now, we're in Himes neighborhood station. We found that we got a lot more productivity if we got out of the interstate and worked our way north of the interstate, closer to Spruce and Del Maybury. We think we can use Himes and some of the local roads to avoid Del Maybury, but get access to that centroid. And what that does is it gives us great opportunity to connect to the neighborhoods, again, walking, biking, pedestrian access. West Shore. West Shore is another example of an inline station. We know that FDOT owns the property immediately north of the interstate. It's been part of the conversation of this project since we begun, that there's a really great opportunity for an inline station here. We're especially considering that we're actually running in the median of the interstate at this point of the corridor, so we can have a walkway that connects to the platform over to the potential proposed FDOT Intermodal Center. Jumping across the bay into Pinellas County, we were looking at the 62nd Avenue area. And what we found is that if we could locate closest to Haynes and 54th, again, that's where we saw the most production, most connection to the neighborhoods, walk, bike access, economic development opportunity. Again, we're recommending another street level neighborhood station at this location. And of course, I skipped over Gateway. Gateway is another intermodal center. Of course, we want to connect to that as well. Moving into downtown St. Pete, again, like in downtown Tampa, we're actually, or even at the Heights area, we'd like to co-locate with some of the other proposals that are being brought forth in our region, specifically the Sunrunner, we know is moving towards construction. Great opportunity. We can actually use the same corridor as the Sunrunner, co-locate, get that connectivity for that regional service. So in summary, you can see the map here. You can see all the stations laid out. And again, a reminder, we're actually looking at all neighborhood stations with the exception of two. The recommendation is to have an inline station at West Shore and another inline station at Waters Bird. And what that gives us is a median cost of about $353 million to construct the entire 41-mile corridor. Now, as you remember, when we first started the Regional Rapid Transit Project, some of those cost estimates were upwards of $455 million. So as we get more detail and we get more, some answers to some of the preferences and how we want to move the project forward, you can see the impact that it's having on our overall project costs. So it's good to see those costs coming down. I do have a breakdown of what is included in that cost percentage-wise. A big portion of that is stations, right? And making sure that we've got all those amenities and those rider conveniences to really make the project a success, as well as 2% for overall parking. Again, that's looking for those shared parking strategies at the street level. Infrastructure at nearly 40%, that's a big portion of our cost. A lot of that is actually occurring between West Shore and downtown Tampa, where instead of right side running, we're actually running in a separate transit envelope in the median of the interstate. 8% for vehicles, and the last is kind of our catch-all, which is project reserves, permitting, professional services, insurances, and the like, and you can see that at 24%. So now that we know, we're making the recommendation in terms of the alignment and those station locations, we've got a better hold of what the costs are. Then the next point of conversation with TBARTA over the past couple of months has been, okay, well, how do we actually construct this project over time? So we're really looking at the current work program that for TB Next, and we recognize there has been quite a bit of changes to that work program as a result of the pandemic. And we've identified a phasing plan that is consistent with the current TB Next program. So we're actually looking at phase 1 being from Pasco to downtown Tampa, phase 2 from Tampa to West Shore, and then phase 3 from West Shore to St. Pete. That puts us with the current work program of an opening year of about a decade out, so 10 years out. But I do want to note that as things change in the coming year and as we get new information, as the Secretary mentioned, on the overall TB Next work program, we can adjust this phasing. So if we have this opportunity where maybe the portion of Pinellas is moving forward, we can certainly flip the phasing to accommodate that, because ultimately the success of this project is contingent on being part of that larger TB Next program. So that's where we are today. Some of our next steps, we've had a couple of calls with FTA, very encouraging, getting them familiar with our project and letting them know kind of where we're at. Our last conversation with them was very productive. They encouraged us to go ahead and move into a federal NEPA process. So that's a great opportunity for us. And a lot of the conversation, even at Region 4 in Atlanta, was about being shovel worthy, which is what completing the NEPA will do for this project. Again, we're really hopeful and optimistic for 2021 and seeing what changes come our way, new administration and how the funding allocations for transit are brought forth, and making sure that we're doing the best we possibly can to get this project positioned to take advantage of whatever comes our way in 2021 is definitely what the team is focused on. So we want to get into the NEPA process, complete that so that we can be as shovel ready as possible. Other than that, we're going to continue to work with FTA and of course, always coordinate with FDOT and what they're doing at the state level and the TB Next program, and just continue to look for those opportunities. Mr. Chair, any questions?
Thank you, Scott, for that presentation. Members' questions? Commissioner Long.
I don't have a question as much as a comment, Scott. And given the familiarity that I've had with getting through the federal process for funding for PSTA, I want to really encourage us to work hand in glove with Harry and Steve, because they were incredibly instrumental in helping us move through that federal process. And it does take 6 to 7 years to get in the pipeline. So the sooner the better that we get started on that, the better position we're going to be to take advantage of the new opportunities coming through from the new administration. And I would encourage us to post haste begin ASAP. Hopefully it's not going to take us 10 years.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Understood, Commissioner.
Commissioner Bellamy, did you have a comment too? I thought.
Not on this, sir.
Okay. Members, any other comments?
I do have one.
Yes, Commissioner Kemp, your record.
Thank you. Yeah, I've actually several. As you know, I've been a critic of this project and have made several statements about it in the past and, where it's been. And so they did cut out, I call it the regional parking garage. It used to have 8,900 parking spaces or something. I mean, I know that's been reduced. It was, just ludicrous from the start. But I still, have significant issues with this. And again, some of the simple things are these elevated in the interstate, connections or elevated connections. In particular, they're all in Hillsborough County. It all goes along our own transit lines already in Hillsborough County that we will be, we're looking at Florida Avenue for our own BRT that I would certainly hope would be submitted first before 10 years. And for Nebraska Avenue on the other side, it looks like this is just, it doesn't make any sense as a regional project because it doesn't have regional stops and it's not fashioned that way. The other is that from the start, they've always said a one seat from Wesley Chapel to St. Petersburg. And that never made any sense at all. And already the local HART and PSTA were doing the local connections for that. Now all of a sudden it's no longer a one connection, one seat from Wesley Chapel to St. Petersburg, but it's mimicking at least two buses, and then they're going to do some shorter routes now under the current thing. So now it's really put in there, competing with our local routes, but on the expressway where many people won't use it, but will try to compete with dollars federally to do this. It really doesn't make sense. The majority of stops are right in the urban downtown area of Tampa, or the downtown, or the most urban area of Tampa, going from USF to West Shore, where we're already putting in local systems and are working on those locally at street grade level. And so it makes all the sense in the world, because they're already doing it, for this to be regional buses doing a regional route from wherever in Pasco to downtown Tampa if they want, or the airport, or over to St. Pete, however they want to fashion it. In 2015, the original study, or that I had seen, had recommended, that was the that was already in there, and I didn't even see it until I started looking myself. And being paid for by FDOT, being paid for by the state. So we've turned it into this crazy project, which has elevated stations in Sulphur Springs and Tampa, which is, I just have to say, it looks terrible to me when I saw it just now in the slide, and I would make sure that I would hope that would never happen, anything like that. But also to think at West Shore that people are going to walk across I-275 there on a catwalk to take the bus. I mean, rather than take the bus otherwise, then they have local stops along 275 north of downtown, where somebody should get on that just to take it downtown and change seats, when we already have a bus that's doing that. That's one of our top routes. So the project doesn't make any sense to me still as it's done. As I had said before, I talked about the CSX Sunrail. They did it in 8 years, but 3 years was working out the contract. Sunrail, the CSX conversion in Orlando. They were able to basically do it in a 5-year window. And yet when they did this evaluation, they gave CSX a 10-year, and they gave this 5-year, and that was confirmed that there's no way that this was going to be done because the roads aren't going to be there. And then there's still the question of north of 275 to USF, what is done there at the interstate. But I'm just putting all that out there with my continued concerns. I think that the reasonable thing, and the thing that would be right and serve the most people and make the most sense still, would be to take express buses, to not have them paid for locally because they're between counties, and to run an express bus from Pasco to Tampa to St. Pete, to the airport, whatever you want to do, but a regional route like that, not with a bunch of stops that are already being done, with intentions to have BRT at street grade level with our top routes in Hillsborough County. And by and large, from anything I can see in Hillsborough County, this is not supported in Hillsborough County. So I'm just going to say all that for the record.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Scott, if you wish to respond to that.
Sure. Yeah, just quickly, understood Commissioner, duly noted your comments. I do want to just say that the station locations that we've selected is a representation of 4 years of detailed technical work, looking at a number of different data points, and really they reflect what we're seeing from the data, the best station locations and the best route pattern to serve how this corridor operates regionally.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you.
My hand raised.
Comments. Is there another follow-up, Pat?
Commissioner Starkey.
Oh, Commissioner
Hi,
Stark.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're recognized.
Thank you. I think there's some new members on the board, and it might be good to refresh everyone's memory about what the cost was per rider when we looked at the CSX route. I do hope one day that is a viable alternative. But my recollection was that the tickets were about $100 a person. I don't know why I'm remembering that number, but that's what comes to mind. Sorry, I have an airplane flying behind me. I would like to suggest that we get all the MPOs together and the different, maybe the CACs, and have one big discussion with the county commissioners and other decision makers in the region to gauge the interest in this, and just have a bigger meeting, a bigger voice represented from all the different counties, because we have to start somewhere, and I believe we have a good plan, and I'd like to see it come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Starkey. Members, any other comments or questions? Okay, food for thought, certainly in our next meeting. There's no other business before the board. We will stand adjourned. Meeting adjourned.